Just a show of hands, who's all on the tech side of things here? Oh, good number. And on the worship side? Good.
We're outnumbered. We should leave.
Okay.
Wow.
That's Chris. See, told you. We'll stay back here.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to start off with some prayer. Aaron, you can probably bring me down a little bit. I think that's probably why. Too much of a windbag. I want to start off with prayer. This is a unique setting. Chris and I are both very firm believers in the fact that technical and worship are intertwined like a marriage. It is not tech worship. It is conjoined. It's the same thing as marriage. When a man and woman get brought together, they become one, and they become they become greater than the sum of the parts. So there are probably a bunch of you here who are probably burned out, tired, frustrated, not sure what's going on and why God's called you into this. This is for you, okay? Part of what this whole conference is about is to get revival in your spirit, revival in your soul, and to get you refocused on what God's doing in your life. So, dear Jesus, you are an awesome, awesome God. We love you. You have chosen us to serve you in ways that the person that is not part of worship or in tech do not understand. Lord, it is a deeply personal ache that we have for you, and we try to do our best for you, Lord. And because of a lot of us are perfectionists, we fail, and we think we do not give you enough. But in all ways, you know we're doing our best for you. Lord, there are some of those here today that are hurt, that feel betrayed, that may be confused, maybe scared, maybe not sure about what God's calling is on their life. Lord, our prayer for you from the whole Revive team is that the people that are here leave with a renewed sense of purpose, a new sense that God is working within them, and that all eyes will be focused completely on you, Lord. We get to do this, God. And it is through your grace that we get to do this. We love you. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, you can talk now. I'll stop.
Well, there's a lot we were going to talk about. We were saying, how do we tag team this? Because there's so many things we want to go over. And one of the big things was, well, I don't know, sometimes with church audio, you tell somebody I do church audio, and they look at you like, yeah, okay, I'm a weekend, well, yeah, but also you're like I'm an armchair quarterback, and it's like, well, no, it's church audio is much more complex than that, and whether it's audio, lighting, whatever form of production, I always say there's about a 95% similarity between what happens in the secular realm and I mean like secular professional and within the church arena, and it's because we need to take it so seriously that the work that we do as the production folks, along with the worship band, makes what happens out here the number one priority, so everybody has their eyes, to me, the congregation has their eyes forward and up. And so I say there is about a 5% difference between secular and what we do, but that 5% is 5 is a small number, but it's still a great number. And probably the first thing is it just has a huge impact, the work that we do, on just the internal impact on people's lives.
Now, part of this is going to require you guys, both the worship and the tech teams, to be totally transparent here, okay? There are going to be some questions I may ask. And if you're sitting here with your worship team or with your tech team, you might be like, but, you guys know what's going on. I'm really blessed at the church that I'm at, the tech team and the worship team, and I lead the tech team. I also play drums and percussion, so I kind of see both sides of it. We get along really great. The worship team's on stage. They respect me. I respect them. They know that I'm looking out for their back. I know that they're looking out for mine. And we all worked together to get the service, what's called, one of my big buzzwords is transparent worship. What transparent worship is we strive to remove all the roadblocks that prevent anybody from God being able to reach them as easily as possible. I'll tell you a quick story about how I came to this thing. In 2002, I begrudgingly went with my wife to a small vineyard church plant in California. It was in a senior center. I grew up Catholic. I had no clue what a regular church service was. We went to the senior center and going, okay, this is a church. Walked in. Now this is 2002. I look over at the guy that's manning the sound, and it's a small box mixer. They're rehearsing, but he's asleep. The sound is terrible. They've got an overhead projector, and the guy's turning the slides, but they're upside down. They're wrong side up. He's got the wrong words on the slide. This went on just not through rehearsal, but through this service. Okay? There was one song that the worship leader played that was called Breathe. Everybody know that song? It's a whole, 8 lines song? That song resonated with me. I didn't know it that day, but in a couple months after that, I went downstairs and I was in my studio and I just kept playing that song, and I couldn't stop playing it. And I just felt like I was either losing my mind or something, or it just felt like an electric shock. Okay? I walked away from an IT director position and went into this full time that next week, because of that one song and that one little crummy church plant where that crummy sound with that crummy overhead projector. And I said, you know what? God reached me no matter what those obstacles were, but it's going to be my work to make sure that I get across to people that, you know what? If you take those out, if there are people that are on the borderline that come into church just because somebody else is dragging them in, and they don't know that God's going to reach out to them that day, there's absolutely no way that I want to that I want it to be impacted by feedback, by a mic not being on right, by an instrument mix not being right, by the lights not going on at the right time. We as a nation are used to that now with watching TV. If you watch TV, the mics are always on, the camera cues key all the time. That's a normal assumption. Down in Toledo where I am, the local TV station uses a lot of graduates. So you'll hear a lot of times where they'll forget to put the mics on, and it's jarring, right? You don't want that. But on the other side, you don't want to beat yourself up for being a perfectionist. I've worked with a lot of perfectionists. They cannot enjoy service. They just can't. No matter how good service is, no matter what happens, they feel that they didn't do it right, that something went wrong. And you don't ever want to do that. Perfection's the goal. That's the attainable. That's the unattainable goal of going for excellence, right? On the other flip side of that, I've gone into churches, and small churches and big churches, it doesn't really matter. You go in there and you got some guy who volunteered or was asked to volunteer because they had a computer, so they must know the tech stuff, right? How many of this has happened, right? Everybody knows somebody that's done this with us. But they're scared of the equipment. It's intimidating, right? I mean, you got a big board or a small board, still doesn't matter. There's a whole bunch of knobs and a whole bunch of words that make no sense to anybody outside of tech. So you don't look at anything other than, okay, they told me to push this, and that's all I'm going to do. So there's no curiosity to say, let me see what this thing does. Right? Oh, I had a church that I had in my denomination, because I go to all the churches in my district's denomination and help them out with the tech. But I had one, and I thought this was an urban legend until I actually saw it. On the board, on the main fader, they had a dyno tape label that said, do not touch. On the main audio, it's like, okay, we're starting to see what the issue is. And I asked the people that were there, I said, do you know anything about this? They said, no, you know. I mean, it was the wrong board for what they had. It was not very volunteer friendly, and it was just completely intimidating with them. So there's a whole lot of things that go in. You know, between the technical side of things and the craft or the art side of things, which we'll get into, and Chris will be talking about that too, is you've got this interesting dichotomy. The worship team they have art, right? I mean, that's an instrument, everybody gets that. It's like, oh, okay, it takes time, it takes practice, it takes whatever to get good at it. On the tech side, that assumption for some reason isn't there. It's like, okay, here's the tech thing you guys figured out, should be okay. But it's not. There's a handicap on that tech side. Chances are whoever's been playing an instrument has either been playing it for a long time, has taken lessons, has the instrument at home. The tech side, you'll have a computer at home, but you certainly won't have a lighting board, you certainly won't have a soundboard at home. Well, some of us did, but you know, I'm an exception. Did you have a soundboard at home?
No. Not yet.
Okay, there you go. Well, you know, that one up there might be for sale soon. And then so there's really no training that you get, because it's kind of hard to go down to your local music store and say, hey, do you have soundboard lessons, right? And then so it requires you going somewhere, trying to spend money to do that, or if you're lucky enough, do you have somebody that knows what they're doing? So on the technical side, you kind of have a little bit of a impediment to learning it. There are ways to do it, and we'll get into it a little bit later. But just know, I mean, technical and worship, it's one team, right? You guys are not separate. We're up there or in the back or wherever. But it's so much a part of the worship team. The tech team can't function without the worship team. I know there are techs that think we can, but you know, it's the same thing. It's such a symbiotic relationship, and it hurts me. It hurts me to the core when I come into a church to help guide the teams and say, look guys, you can't do this anymore. You just can't. You're tearing each other apart. And out of any of the takeaways, if you guys are doing this, try to figure out how to do this. Because once you do this, you're going to open up a world of things that are going to happen in your church that you're not going to expect. I'm going to let you do talking now.
Oh, thank you.
I'll shut up. You go ahead. I'll sit.
Wow. Brian makes a lot of good points. And he's talking about excellence and perfection. And whether this is from the worship band or what we do in production, you know, our goals are the same, but how we define them can vary a lot, and it's not necessarily good. I'm sitting over here debating asking this question to you for actually open answers. But the question was, how do you define a successful service? And having worked with a lot of people, having dealt with a lot of emails over the years through my website, also with talking with Brian, that some people define a successful church service as, a musician might say, the set was tight, we didn't flub any chords, everything was perfect from the musical side. The pastor's going to have his definition, which I'll get to that in a minute. But even from production, the church that I'm at, we're about 1,500 people. We have 9 technical people that are required to run a full service because by the time you do multiple cameras, lighting, audio. But that defining of a successful service is easy to say, well, were all our camera shots good? Were the lighting cues at the right time? Did we have any video errors? The more the more complex it gets, the more possibilities for problems. But does it define a successful service? Not at all. I asked my technical director one day, I said, can you define for me what you see as a successful service? And my TD is somebody who is really, I would say, a perfectionist. But his answer was, he said, when I look at a successful service, has the service adhered to the biblical instructions for worship? Does the service match the stated mission of the individual congregation? And he went on to say that a service that doesn't meet these qualities could be one people like, It can have the right lighting cues, and it can evoke the right emotions. But it will not be a success based on what's the most important thing. And that's not what happens back there or up here, but out there. And so I asked my pastor, I said, how do you define a successful service? Was he going to say, well, it's people coming to Christ, it's baptisms, it's amens, I'm going to avoid a tithing joke here. And he said, number one, it lifts my eyes to God's greatness, love, and faithfulness. That's in Psalm 146, 1 through 5. It connects me with the people of God, Psalm 133. He says, we gather to celebrate in ways I cannot individually. There's a reason for corporate worship. It encourages and instructs me with God's word, 2 Timothy 2:15. It celebrates the finished work of Christ, Romans 3:21, 26. We serve God not to barter for salvation, but because he has graciously offered us new life. And then he says, it challenges me to respond to God in obedience, James 1:22, 25. We seek not just information, but life transformed into the image of Christ. Now, did anybody here catch part about technical production quality? Anybody? Well, it's important that we do our work so well that, again, the congregation, eyes forward, eyes up. So when I think of what it means for me to provide a successful service, myself in audio, or somebody in lighting, or a worship team member, or Brian, because I keep looking over here, we provide support for a successful service by being the best we can be, by dedicating ourselves to the craft, by working in advance of the service. Musicians, thank you for practicing before practice, for learning the songs. And so equally, I should be spending my week listening to those songs over and over, so I know how that mix should sound when I walk in here. So what I present to the congregation, what we present together, it jives together, but then it presents to them what they expect as well. So we are working in advance of the service. And the biggie, technical people, I'm sorry to tell you this, use your heart, not just your head. Whew, I didn't expect to tear up a little bit. I'm all right. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
You're doing good.
Yeah, technical person tearing up. Whew, wow.
Don't drip on my iPad.
Yeah, well, we have such great, wonderful power in what we do. I mean, there are days where I walk in and I will just go up to the worship leader or the musician. I'll say, man, thanks for being here this morning. Or when you practice on Wednesday, you were really on it and on fire, and I could tell. Or after the service, like, man, you guys really brought that worship to the congregation, and I could tell that the congregation was into it. But also to the people on lighting and cameras, after service or before, I will thank them, because we are all working together, and we can, in technical production, be heady all the time and working for what needs to happen, what should happen, what should have happened, what can we do to fix it next time. But it's right here that we affect people, and it's through that that I'm having a tough time transitioning to the next point. So,
Do you need a lifeline?
as it turns out, I'm not turning it over for you for the next point. I'm turning it over to myself for the next point. No, actually, I'm turning it over to Aaron, now that he's had a heart attack. What does that require of you? And I'm talking to the technical people here, musicians, worship leaders, others. It's going to apply to you as well. but you probably, hopefully, already know that. What I need from the technical production group is to dedicate yourself to your craft. Brian spoke of someone falling asleep behind the mixer. I've walked into service before, and I caught the part of the sound check, and the sound guy set all the faders the same point all the way across for the whole band, and never touched the mixer during the rest of the service. And so it didn't sound like a blend up here. It sounded like everybody at the same volume, which we know is not how music should be, because we listen to music all the time. It's in our car, on our phone, soon to be on our watches apparently. But please dedicate yourself to your craft. There are tons of websites, books, but have fun with it. Go to a concert. Listen to the mix. If you have an SPL meter on your phone, pull that out. See what volume they're running it at. Yes, your wife will roll her eyes when you do that, but you get used to it. But please dedicate yourself to your craft, because we don't have a whole lot of time during the week to practice on our, at-home worship band that's just there at any moment we want to practice. But there is so much more that we can do, and our work is evident by what happens out here. So to that, Brian, are you willing to serve?
Maybe. Yeah. Good. Is that my cue?
That is your cue.
All right. We've talked a lot of the heady stuff, right? And it is important. There's a couple of things. Church size here, just curious. How many churches are under 100 in here? Okay, that's what I expected. Under 200 or 300. Okay, let's go bigger. Under 500 or 500? Okay, 1,000? Okay, cool. So, small church guys. You're probably the only person in tech, or you serve multiple roles. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a unique concept because you are the only person. If you're not there, usually there is no tech or somebody else goes in there. You don't have the luxury of having someone that you can go to. Look at the manual for the board. If you're blessed enough to have a Mackie, the Mackie manuals are hilarious to read. They know they're boring, so they actually make them funny. Alan and Heath manuals are written in typical English style, so they get a little bit tough. But learn the controls on the board. I mean, really, it's not any different than anything else that you're doing. If you don't know what the board is capable of, you're not going to learn it. Every single board, no matter if it's the same series or whatever, is going to have its own idiosyncrasies, and the only way that you learn those idiosyncrasies is playing with them. Here's what I tell a tech member when I bring them on my team. One, your number one role is to completely disappear. You know that you've done a good service if nobody ever notices you. The tech ministry is a very different ministry. It is the one ministry that if you do your job very, very well, nobody will ever notice that you're there, okay? People don't get that. They kind of look at the concerts and they see the sound guy there and it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. But there's so much more to it than just that. And one thing I always tell my tech guys, and every church that I've done this at, I'll tell them and everybody goes, pfft. And then at some point throughout their career, they call me back, they email me or say, and go, oh, you were right. There's going to be a point, I can teach you everything about the board, I can teach you where everything's supposed to be and where it's going to sound good. There will come a day in a worship service where you will feel the presence of the Holy Spirit just come down hard on the church, and you look up and the entire church congregation is worshiping. They're in sync with the music. Everything is clicking. The worship team is energized by the congregation. The congregation is energized by this, and the Holy Spirit is just there, and God's just going, that's what I'm talking about. And I tell them, I said, at that point, you're going to look down at the board and go, wait, that doesn't look right. At that point, you walk away, you just back up from the board. You're not in control anymore. You are absolutely not in control. And if you touch that board, you're going to ruin that moment. And the last thing you want to do is ruin that moment, because that's what you're aiming for.
Is this the part where I differ in opinion?
No, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, and one of the things about Brian and I is we think a lot alike, but in some areas we have differences. But it all comes back, and it's all good. I have had times where that moment's upon you, and you go, He's here, and He's very evident right now. And in my case, I realized the work I'm doing with my hands is God's hands on mine. It's not me going, oh, I need to change this. It's Him saying, fix this, modify this, tweak this just a little bit, because we are His hands, and as sound guys, I guess ears.
No, you're right. I mean, I'm
but
kind of being a little bit more
understand.
dramatic where you back off. But yeah, I mean, and I feel the same way. But I mean, there are also times where I will just back off for a little bit and just worship. And that's one thing as technical guys, as technical folks, that we kind of forget to do, is worship. It's kind of hard because we have to keep our eyes open, especially if you're running Media Shop, PowerPoint, ProPresenter, whatever. You can't exactly close your eyes and worship. I've done that, and I've had guys that done that, and all of a sudden it's like, uh-oh. You listen and go, well, the congregation kind of quieted down, but we're not at that point in the song. It's like, I better open my eyes and see what I'm doing. It's a little bit easier on the sound guys because once you can raise your hand and do this one, you just kind of do the other one. But there's a point. The other thing is, as a tech team, show up on time. Show up early. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. That applies to turning on the mics. That applies to turning off mics. That applies to everything, right? Your focus shouldn't be looking down at the board. Your focus should be looking at the band and seeing what's going on stage. Because if you don't watch what's going on stage, and this is part of why you know where the equipment is, because I usually will know where everything's laid out, and just because I know where everything is, I can just have my hands on the board, and I can be looking out at the worship team here and seeing. Because if the worship team is anything like mine, every now and then they'll call an audible, and when I think they're coming down, they're actually not, and they're going to do another chorus again. Well, if I'm just looking at the board going, okay, well, this is the way they did in rehearsal, I'll be bringing the mix down at about the point that they're going to the next chorus, like, oh, that's not good. And the same thing with turning mics on and off. We have a pastor who'll come up every so often, right after a song without telling us. Well, if you don't know that, you don't want the pastor coming up here and going, hello, in that, because then it's like, okay, well, that doesn't seem professional. It used to be that at a small church, you used to get a bye because everybody would go, okay, small church, not a big deal, we're not going to expect anything much. But with iPods and iPhones and all the constant good music and everything that you're hearing now, there's an expectation, no matter if you're small or a big church, that everything is going to sound like what they hear on the iPod or an iPhone. Is it realistic? No. Are you going to be able to get there as a small church? Not unless you got a pocket full of money and a lot of people that are dedicated to that, and that is okay. One of the articles that I think got a lot of traffic was, it's okay to not be okay. And the whole thing I wrote on that is because I knew that there were people, especially in the small churches, that were stressing out because they were trying to emulate what the big churches were doing. The big churches will have budgets. They'll have, great equipment, a great room, dedicated people. You can't get there. But what you can do is make whatever you have sound as good as it can have. I'm going to switch to the worship team in a sec. Technical team, are most of you running wedges or monitors as opposed to in-ears? Okay. Have you guys ever come up on stage when the band's playing and hear what it sounds like up here? It's okay to say no. All right. I'll recommend that you do that. Because part of the problem with wedges and out there is stage volume, right? There's always a stage volume war. But if you haven't been up on here when the band's playing, especially if you have a full drum kit that's not in a room and it's right here, you won't really know what they're trying to listen to up here. And that's part of that joining between worship team and tech team. You can't know what they're asking for or why they're asking for, I need this much more in my monitor or whatever, if you are not up here ever hearing what they're hearing. And then on the other side, on the worship team side, you need to get out in the room to hear what these guys are having to go through, what the tech team's having to go through. You need to be able to interact, even if you're coming up in the booth. Can I do one more thing in the worship team?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. This is for the worship folks. And I think it's built in, because even professional folks do the same thing. When the tech team is doing a sound check, we really need a sound check, which is we want that one instrument doing one thing at the level that you guys are going to be playing at. A lot of the time, the worship team will be up here, they'll be tuning up, they'll be talking back and forth, the drums will be bashing away. Well, it's kind of hard to get, you know, a acoustic guitar sounding right in the mix when you've got the kick drum blaring at you, right? You can get a sound check done in 5 minutes. No lie. You can just run through, because at that point, all you're doing is just saying, okay, do I have a good enough level? Move on. Electric guitar guys, please, this is a favor for the sound team. You all have volume pedals. I know you do. And I know you guys cheat, okay? You'll start off with the thing low, you'll bring it up to mid-level and go, okay, I know he's not going to bring me up very much in my in the house, so I need all that extra pedal to go up more, right? Yes, I can see you guys. All right, here's the thing. The reason we want it, the way I do a sound check on a guitar, mid-level, high level. And the only reason I want to do that is I know that you guys want to sound louder in the house, and that's fine. But when you go all the way up, I want to make sure that you're not peaking the meters up there. Because if you're peaking the meters, I'm going to have to adjust the gain down. And the last thing I want to do is during the middle of a service, have to adjust gain because you're peaking the meter out there and you're clipping stuff. That's the only reason I do it. Same thing on the keyboards. And keys are actually almost worse than the guitar, because they've got that little volume control on the side that they're sneaky up and go. But it's the same thing with the keyboard. It's like, okay, give me the normal level that you're going to be doing, and then give me the loudest level, because we're trying to set everything there. Ideally, you want the gain set in rehearsal. You want to be done with it, and then especially on in-ears or even in wedges. We don't want to be messing around with the gain during service, because that's going to be upsetting, because you're going to hear the increase in the monitors or your in-ears, and you're going to be like, okay, my mix in the ears, or whatever isn't right. But you guys need to kind of switch roles just once in a while, just to see. I don't expect the tech team up here to come up here and play Motley Crue. You know, I don't expect the worship team to go up there and be.
I think the tech team is a Motley Crue.
Well, that's true, yeah. More motley than others.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. But if you can't see what the other person's hearing or going through, you won't know. I said, sound checks, you can just watch the frustration building up with the tech team, because they can't get anybody here to pay attention to them. And vocalists, who are vocalists in here? Okay, please. This is your mic check. I know it is. Sound check. Hi, check, 1. How do you sing? Hello, right? Talk, you don't have to sing, though it'd be great. And I know everybody feels uncomfortable just singing a cappella. Just talk as loud as you'd sing.
I have him sing
That's all
Happy
we
Birthday.
care.
I say, sing me Happy Birthday.
Oh, it's my birthday.
Why?
I'm old.
Hey, more gifts.
Oh, that's true.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But, you know, those are kind of like tips and tricks for some of this stuff. It's just because, you know, you do it at that level, we'll get your mix right. It'll be easy to do.
All right.
Your turn.
Okay. So let's talk about willingness to serve. And then I'm going to talk about willingness to say yes and willingness to say no. I want to get some haters on that one. Willingness to serve. I think we have covered quite a bit of willingness to serve, and that is dedicating yourself to your craft, showing up on time, following good best practices in production practices. That's that first cup of coffee now is just starting to dive off a little bit. But being willing to serve not only in the work you do, but be willing to serve others, serving musicians, serving other technical folks. During our services, when we have communion, we've already got the communion trays in the sound booth, and just because of the scenario, as the sound guy during that time of communion, I can pass communion to the person on the lighting board. I can take communion to the person on one of the cameras. And so I'm serving them. We are communing together. All of us together, whether it's up here or back there or in between, are all here for a common purpose.
While you pause, can I interject something?
I was going for a dramatic pause.
Oh, I ruined it, didn't
Not really, actually. I couldn't find the page I was looking for.
I? Oh,
But when I look at that back page of this, your conference booklet, will you not revive us again that your people may rejoice in you? And we should be able to rejoice even in the midst of the hard work up here and the hard work back there, that we should have times where we can sing during service, even if I'm running sound. So be willing to serve not just in what you do, but in serving others. And here's where the haters come. Just gonna see what I can hide behind.
yeah, not me, dude. Sorry.
All right, first I shall make haters of some of the technical people. You need a willingness to say yes. When somebody comes to you at the very last minute with a request, you need to be willing to say, yes, I can make that happen. And here's the thing. If you try, it doesn't work. You tried, it didn't work. If it comes up again, then you can say to that person, usually the pastor, we tried that before, this is what happened. But you really need to be willing to say yes. And I will give you an unfortunate example where it doesn't always work. Well, it worked. We had missionaries come into our church, and at the very last minute, well, actually they got there at the very last minute, and the man's wife handed a CD to the sound guy. I was not running that weekend, but I was in the room and I could enjoy it. And she just says, look, I want to sing this song, and just play this as the backing track. Now, there were two problems. Well, there were three. The first was he did not have a chance to just run the CD through the system. But he was willing to say yes because she wanted to sing in a way to minister to the congregation. Second problem. She had a very soft voice. So he had to crank her gain just to the edge of feedback. But he could do it, and he did it because he was willing to serve so she could serve the congregation and minister to the congregation. But three, and here's the big problem. You know how people will give you a track and they'll say it's a split track? Okay. How many people here are familiar with Patsy Cline? Okay, going way back. It was not a split track. It was Patsy Cline in full volume. And because of this singer, she sang so low. Not low as in frequency. So softly that he couldn't bring her loud enough. And so what the congregation saw was somebody dressed in African garb who sounded just like Patsy Cline. But you know what? I loved it because she was so into what she was doing because she was ministering to the congregation, of pouring out this song of love onto them. And so whatever we have that we're given, it's easy to say, look, I haven't had a chance to play this, to throw it in Power Presenter. I've had times when somebody's given me a DVD. Can you play this? Oh, you just burned this on your computer that's 15 years old. Yeah, that won't be a problem. But we try it and it doesn't work. And we say, okay, let's next time bring it into me early. But there are other times when it does work. And that last minute request you get of, can you do this? Hasn't come from the person's bright idea. It's come from God saying, I want you to do this for me. Yeah, I know you got to talk to the sound guy to get it done, but I want you to do this for me. And so in production, we have to be willing to say yes. Here come the other haters. Willingness to say no. There are times when something comes up at the last minute, and we do need to be able to say, look, I can't accommodate this. Sometimes it's because of a lack of equipment. Sometimes it's because it might be, maybe it's not the pastor that's brought it to you. You know, somebody said, gosh, it was there a minute ago. So was my hair, come to think of it.
That was more than a minute ago.
Did I mention production is not a stressful job?
I see what you did there.
Yeah, thank you. But you do have to be willing to say no. But don't let those no's be something that and now to you. No, don't let that no be something that is for lack of better words, just hard on the person that you give it to. If they have a request, can you please do this for me? And you might have to say no, but don't let it be no. Let it be no, not now. We can try that next weekend. And maybe you do get somebody who gives you a DVD at the last minute and says, look, I just felt like this should be played. You're like, well, I really can't do that because we haven't tested it. It hasn't been okayed with, let's say, the pastor or somebody in authority. But there are times that we do need to say no and be willing to say no because it is best for the situation. Yeah, I'll pick on electric guitars. Now this all up here looks good, but there are times in technical to say, no, you can't use that. I have seen equipment with, it's like you got the little wires sticking out, and you say, yes, this piece of equipment does work 100% of the time, but I'm afraid to be within 10 feet of it because I can just imagine this huge power arc coming out of it. Technical people, you have a responsibility for the safety of the people on the stage, whether that's the worship leader, the congregation, person who's coming up to be baptized, to whoever grabs a mic, anybody up here, their safety is on you. And there are times when you have to say, look, I'm not going to put that amp on the stage. I'm not going to put that pedal board made of plaster of Paris and aluminum foil on my stage. I would like to. I'm sure the tone is great. But you do need that willingness to say yes and to be supportive of people, but also say no and equally be supportive of people. Much of our work, these transition well together. Much of our work in production is all about our mindset. That's really what makes us successful, what makes it good. What God uses through us, how God uses us. A lot of it is just through our mindset. And one of the big things that we can do, and this is where I do honestly throw it over to Brian, is technical people, when you talk to non-technical people, don't talk technical, as my wife has often begged me. To you.
I'm going to expand a little bit on what Chris said with this is the part where we agree, but we slightly disagree, but it comes together in the end anyway. Okay, and the willingness to say yes and no. I am at a fault to say yes a lot, but the good part is the pastor knows if I have to say, hey, we can't do that, but this is why we can't, and these are the issues. If you want us to go ahead with it, we'll go ahead with it, but just so you know, these are what we're aware of. You can't just go and say no. I mean, if you haven't had that level of trust built up yet with the worship team, with whoever, it gets kind of hard. I'm at the point now where I can say no without necessarily having to explain why, especially if it's in the heat of a moment. But I usually try to say yes, or I say, we can do this, but. The last thing anybody wants to see is tech guys, and I am as guilty as anybody else. We are great at throwing snarky comments all the way around because, we're geeky and we think we're okay up there and stuff.
Do we get awards for that?
No, I hope so. I'd be winning one, big one. But, and I've had to temper myself because, I'm a smart aleck, so if you can't have told already by now. I have fun in the booth. I love being back there. I love doing this, though you'd never guess that I'm a completely giant introvert, and I'd rather be back up there than up here. God just is using me to do this, so I'm gonna obey him, even though I hate being up here. But the comments that you make, even though you're probably just making a joke out of it, they do tend to hurt or grate on people. You can make like techie comments if they're, oh yeah, they didn't do this or whatever. It gets back to the worship team. In rehearsal, if you're here or if the worship team's here and you're the only one back there, guess what? They're not feeding off the energy here. They're feeding off your energy. And if you're sitting up there like this at the board, they're not going to feel any energy. They don't know what's going on and stuff. Closing comments, because we're going to have to do closing comments because
we have 12 minutes.
No, we have to look at the big clock. And Aaron's wiggling the mic, so I know that we're not. So, but just to leave you guys with this, and Chris, you can wrap that up. Let's both wrap it up, I guess.
Well, did you want to talk a bit more on stop talking technical?
Oh, yeah, don't talk technical. No, seriously. If there's a way that you can word anything, if you need equipment, do not say we need a new piece of equipment because this piece is old. Say we need a new piece of equipment because it will make this part of the ministry do better and why it will do better. Not that it's going to be this. If you're explaining to somebody why things are going to take an hour and a half, you can't say it's because it's rendering an MP4 video in 1920 by 1280 format because someone's going to just hear wah, 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 right? Things take time. We cheat ourselves by trying to be pleasers. We want to get it done. We want to do it. But then we get grumpy because people expect it at the last minute and that becomes the norm. Explain to them what is involved in what you're doing, but do it in terms as though it's a different language that you're trying to talk, right? Don't talk about gain. Don't talk about, okay, this. Word it in something else. I hardly ever say, okay, I think I need to cut your vocal at 2 kilohertz because it's sounding just a little bit this. I usually go, is it boomy? Is it sounding like a can? Is it shrill? People get that. They don't get the techie stuff, even though we bathe in this stuff, right? So that's the takeaway from that. Communicate with the outside world, not in our own world.
All right, I can go ahead and wrap this up. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Nope. We're going to be available through most of the day for questions and stuff, especially specific technical or whatever questions. I said, Chris and I, for us, this is our ministry. And I hope through this, somewhere in here, even with the laughter, I know you get that we enjoy this. I hope you guys get that same sense of what you guys do. No, I'm not done.
Okay, thank you. We could really go on for a long time, and you guys would get bored after a while, I promise, because we would start talking technical. We can do that in about 5 minutes, can't we? Oh, okay. It was, we were going through different notes. There are a lot of things that came up on the heart of production work, and that I've always told people, look, you're not doing audio work, you're not doing video work, you're not doing production work, you're doing ministry work. By having a heart of a minister, of one who is dedicated to your craft, one who is dedicated to the congregation, one who is willing to minister, to support, to care for your peers, your tech crew, the musicians, the pastor. I mean, I'll tell you what, I know when it comes to talking to the pastor, I could tell the pastor absolutely anything. Look, there's an elephant on the ceiling. There's butterflies, and coming out of a monitor. He'd go, yeah, sure, great. Because if I do that before a service, he is so focused that it's just not the right time for it. But I'll tell you what, it is the right time any time to say, I'm praying for you. This is going to be a good day. Afterwards, thank you for the service. Thank you for your word. Thank you for letting God work through you. You are all ministers. Will you not revive us again, that your peace may